sovereign on the ocean floor, with me in the calm. You're with me in the storm. Sovereign in my greatest joy, sovereign in my deepest cry, with me in the dark, you with me at the dawn. In your everlasting arms, all the pieces of my life, from beginning to the end, I can trust you. In your never failing love, you work everything for good. Lord, whatever comes my way, I can trust you. Lord, whatever comes my way, I will trust you. Don, whatever comes my way, I will trust you, Lord. Amen.
Amen. I will trust you.
Amen. Whatever comes my way.
Yes.
Trust you and Daniel with my life.
When we understand who the Lord is, it's easy to think about, easy to do. What you've done unto the least of these, you've done it unto me. Love thy neighbor as thyself. And like one of the brothers said, who is your neighbor? The neighbor of light is darkness. The neighbor of evil is good. The neighbor of, keep going right down the line, one is the neighbor of the other. So when you can love that and understand that, it's real easy to love yourself. That's why today I've been gone most of the week. I left Tuesday and went down, spent till yesterday evening, maybe 9:30 I got back home. And was thinking about different things, and as I was sitting and hunting, and gives you a lot of hours. It's a little cold, but you sit there and you think about a lot of things. And so I was thinking about the whole concept of our intellect. And so I wanted to go to this weekend for just a few minutes. I don't think it has to be a extremely long discussion, but I do want to have a little bit of discussion on finding our intellect. And you know, if you don't find, it's like, for instance, there was a scientist around 1500, right in that area. He made the statement. He said, he rolled a ball across the ground, and he said, if you could get this ball to the magnificent speed of 40 miles per hour, it would lose its gravitational pull and go off into space. Now, in 1450 or 1500, that was pretty good intellect. But today, if someone came out and said that, we would say that person has lost his senses. He has no intellect. And I was thinking about that, and that's to keep up or to find the intellect of the Spirit or of us in the age that we're in. It was us in Adam's day. It was us in every day thereafter. As the intellect changed, the us in all of creation found the intellect and moved further. And as they did that, it was a progression. So I wanted to talk just a little while on finding our intellect, or understanding our day and its message, or being able to tell the difference, maybe if you put it that way, between the difference between one age and another. For instance, I have said many times, before we get into the slides, I've said many times that the 7 church ages are the teenage years, 13 through 19. You know, in 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Ephesus, Smyrna, right on down the line, all of those ages, 7 of them down to Laodicea, teenage years. And you and I both know that in the child's teenage years, they need a whole lot of direction. They need a whole lot of law. They need a whole lot of being able to bring them through their immaturities. They need to have somebody a lot of times to not only hold their hand, but to drive and force them into doing something. But when the teenage years are over, for me to do that to a 30-year-old person, you know, you kind of out of it here. The leadership's been kind of out of it because we came out of our teenage years. You don't have to spank me. You don't have to drive me to get me to go a certain direction. You don't have to do any of those things. Just live with me, and I promise you, I'll get the work done that I need to do. I'll do it because I'm out of those years. You know, the teenagers, that's the 7 years where that they absolutely think they know everything. The church ages. And about 20 years old, you begin to say, wow, my parents are getting so much smarter, you know, and it's not really the parents that are getting all that much smarter. It's coming out of those teenage years, that age of being self-centered. I always said the teenage years are the Aries years. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but Aries in the zodiac. And Aries is the most self-centered sign in the zodiac. And Aries, Linda Goodman, I think the lady that wrote a lot about the zodiac and some great things, she said that an Aries is like a baby discovering itself. But the problem is it does it its whole life. You know, it discovers that it has holes in the ears, holes in the nose, you know, and it discovers that it has a mouth. It tries to put crayons in the nose. It discovers it has so many fingers, and it's just, it's all about self-centeredness, all about me. And so that's kind of those teenage years. It's how do I look? How am I acting? How am I being? I want me to be portrayed. And then it's kind of over. You grow up, you know, you kind of put your real person on after all of that, coming through the wilderness and discovering yourself, and then you begin to grow up and you begin to be yourself. And so we're in those teenage years, we're finding our intellect, and we're making a lot of decisions about different things that later we have to change and adjust and do everything else. So in talking about it, I just thought we would go through this for just a moment. We're talking on relationships. It's part 16. And I did send the slides out. I think if everyone got them, I got a couple of people wrote back and said, hey, there's only 11 slides here.
16 total. I thought you were missing some.
We're used to, you're missing some. We're used to 20, 22, 24, 25. But it's what I wanted to get in today. And talking about this, before I get started, I do want to say, let's, and I'm going to turn that heat down. Just just lower the temperature to a couple of degrees, and it'll go off. But so we'll talk about finding our intellect, understanding who we are, maturing, coming to our senses. I think one place Paul said having our senses matured in the book of Hebrews. Another place Paul talks to the Corinthian church, and he says, I fed you with milk because your senses are dull. And so I don't believe we're at that stage in life. I don't believe that this age is at that stage in life. So it's a matter of coming to your senses, or coming to exactly what you're supposed to be in your age, or moving from rolling the ball at 45 miles on the ground to a satellite in the heavens, taking 1 million pictures a minute and sending us back worlds and worlds and worlds of who we are. It's moving the difference between those two. John Huss in 1500s and George Whitefield in the 1800s, there was a huge difference. John Huss was a great leader, right there with kind of under the Martin Luther concept, protesting the Catholic Church, burned at the stake. But if you go read his books, he was Trinitarian through and through. He had a lot of things he really believed that were way off. But that was the intellect for that age. Now, we don't want to use the intellect that John Huss had when it comes to the world situation. George Whitefield come along. He began to preach the serpent seed. He talked about, the serpent and it bringing a seed into the earth, which was all real good. And Brother Branham kind of picked up on that. And a lot of people said, well, I don't understand Brother Branham. All he did was preach so many things that all the others preached. He preached a lot of Clarence Larkin. He preached a lot of George Whitefield. Well, I preach a lot of William Branham, and I preach a lot of Clarence Larkin and George Whitefield and all of them, but I preach it from my own revelation. I minister it from my own revelation. So you have to bring all that up to the intellect of today. And to understand in your intellect, the understanding of today is that we are not looking for the perfect human being. We are receiving a perfect understanding of humanity, but we're not thinking there's going to be this perfect human being. It's not going to happen. Human beings progress, and humans always will progress. That's what humanity is about. And humans make big mistakes. That's what we're here for. We're here to trial and test and go through situations and sharpen iron to iron and sharpen our intellect and make it greater every day. So we'll go to the first slide, and it's Relations Part 16, Finding Our Intellect, and we'll read this. This is from last week. We didn't get to it, and it fits in kind of today. That is, marriage has evolved and the institution of the past is dead. It's not about viewing the wife as a weaker vessel or the husband as a stronger. We are one. That old school is finished. If you're going to live together in a relationship, it needs to be on a new field of love divine and not with superiority of any kind. Love each other with all your heart and view each other as one. That old relationship will not grow a family today. Let's move beyond the old and step into this with love, commitment, and partnership. This is a whole new day. So what I'm saying here is, and a lot of people, it's already, out there, Don Parnell doesn't believe in marriage anymore, and you can live together, and you can do this, and you can do that. And in one sense of the word, every bit of that's true. Praise the Lord. In another sense of the word, it's so silly, it's pathetic. I didn't say that. What I said was we've moved beyond the concepts of marriage. It's just like I believe in the law. I believe in the law 100%. I believe that I have a spirit in me that will just naturally produce what I need to produce. But I'm not going to preach the law, and I'm not going to push the law, and I'm not going to force the law on you. It's like polygamy. Somebody said, can we live in polygamy now? Well, that's been up to you, not now. That's been up to you throughout all time, whether you live in polygamy or not. it doesn't matter to me. I will say that I can't do it here in America because it's against the law, so I won't do it. Can I do it, though? Can I go out here and live in polygamy? Well, you're living in polygamy now, whether you know it or not. Coming into this earth puts you into a polygamic situation. And so, is it okay if we just live together and we don't get a marriage license and we don't get married by the government? That's been your choice throughout all time. What government makes you live together or not live together? No government does that. It's your choice. It's been your choice all along. I'm not sitting here changing up a bunch of things. I'm just telling you that we're removing those old governmental institutions and all their ideas and all their limitations on what you are. If you want to live together and you've committed to one another, and you don't, here in America is all I can speak for. I don't know the laws of the other places. Just plan on this. You won't get Social Security from one another. You won't receive death benefits from one another. You won't receive insurance for one another at the places where you work. There's a lot of reasons why we go ahead and use the marriage law, and we go to a government and we get a certificate so I can put my family on my insurance. I can get life insurance that they can get when I die. I can get all, on and on and on. There's a lot of reasons why if you go get a marriage license, you're going to be better off if you really are committed to one another. But you don't need it. That's all I'm saying. And I'm saying that the age has moved beyond the marriage concepts, and that's why the marriage concepts are fading away. And people aren't using them so much anymore because it's the age we're in. So now we have evolved, and that past institution is dead. And this was what I was saying, and that is step into this new field of love divine without any superiority, without the one being over the other. Love each other with all your heart. View each other as one. That old relationship will not grow a family today. If you think you're going to grow a family today and use those old headship styles, it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. The family's not going to grow together and be together and enjoy life and enjoy one another. So let's move beyond the old and step into this with love, commitment, and partnership. This is a whole new day. So we see this, the next slide. All of the laws, think about all the laws that have come out. What was Moses had 5,300 and some odd laws. And then all the laws of every government across the world right now. Think of one, I think it's 196 countries in the world today. And every one of them have a government with all of their laws being pushed across all the people. And then you have some unified governments, international governments like the Euro in Europe, the North American, the Americas. You have Russia and Asia and all of its unified, the tiger countries. They all come together, and they kind of impose not only their little individual governments, but then their united governments, so to speak, internationally. And they all come into the United Nations, and they fuss and argue over all of their governments and all of their laws and everything else. And then you have all the biblical laws, and you have all the Mosaic laws, the Old Testament laws, and then you can go into the New Testament. You can read all the laws that Paul and John and Peter and everybody else laid down, and you have all this, and you lay all that on top of it, and you say, now these are my absolutes. Well, you're just silly if you think those are your absolutes, all of those laws. If you think you can keep 1/10 of them, you'll be very lucky, and you will be condemned all your life. Those are not my absolutes. I don't even worry about them. All of the laws were in us. Where did all these laws come from? Us. They were inside of us. We use them on one another to try and be the same. If Alan doesn't smoke and drink and curse and lie and steal. If Alan dresses a certain way, if Alan talks out of his mouth a certain belief that Don Parnell has, slow but sure, all of my laws will be instituted and we will be the same. And so that's the whole concept of what laws are, is let's make somebody the same. Every lady has to have her hair cut. She has to have a dress at a certain point, or hair uncut. Men have their hair cut, a dress at a certain point. You can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do that. And all of a sudden, hey, they're in the message. It's laws. It's all it is. All the laws were in us. We used them on one another, is what we did. We used them to praise one another. He's a great example. Boy, he's really great. I wonder how they felt when David did what he did, and Shemaiah was spitting on him, and he was being driven off of his throne due to his situations and all the things that he did in life. Wonder if they thought so much about him being so praiseworthy, him being a great king, him being all these things. See, we use the law on one another. We thought we could do that. We thought it's what we wanted. But we proved it's not. How did we prove it's not what we want? Because we couldn't do it. We couldn't live up to all of those laws. And man, nobody wants to be condemned. Nobody wants to be condemned. Nobody wants to live like that. Nobody wants to stifle your own spirit every morning when you get up to the time you go to bed. And nobody wants to live that way. That's not an enjoyable life. But we thought that's what we wanted, and we proved to ourselves it's not what we wanted. We came through 1, 2, and 3 testaments. We came through 6,000 years. We came through law. We came through nations. We came through the blood. We came through the water. We came through the Spirit. We kept applying law after law after law. But we proved that it's not what we want. When we were theophany, we had a knowledge of all those laws, but didn't know what it would do to us. That's why we applied them all. I don't know of another law we possibly could apply. Can you think of any we might not have done yet? Or at least tried to do? There's none. We had them all in our mind. We had knowledge, but didn't know what it would do to us. Then we created a world to desire and make one wise. We took the tree of life and took a section out of it and created a tree of the knowledge of good and evil and said, we're going to find out. We've got this concept, we've got this knowledge of what all these things we have in us will do to us and what it will make us. Now let's build a world and test it. Let's build a world and come into it. We didn't know what it would do to us. Then we created a world to desire, make one wise, a tree of knowledge, good news, and we are gaining our understanding from that. We've tested almost everything. We are in love now. Commitment and understanding. And we have found that love is the greatest teacher. We found that love does the greatest thing for us. We found that all of our contrasts bring us to a certain way. And we found that we can't live by laws. We can't live by absolutes. We can't live by preconceived knowledge without any experience. We can't live by any of those things. We found that we have to go through these things and adjust our theophonic thoughts to human flesh and humanity and make the adjustments to that and stop trying to make a perfect human being and just understand perfectly humanity. That's what this is about. So we have these things that are happening to us. And I went to a scripture trying to find our intellect. If we go to the next slide. Paul is talking to us, talking to the Corinthian church. And he says in Corinthians 2:2, I determined to know nothing among you except Jesus Christ and him crucified. So, Paul's saying a whole lot there. Paul is just saying, all I want to know from you is a present day message, and I don't really care what else you did. That's all he's saying. I don't care about anything that you did. For the Spirit, jump all the way to 2:11, for the Spirit searches all things, even the depths of God. For who among men knows the thoughts of a man except the spirit of the man which is in him? So what Paul is saying here is, I know that you have been through so much. And I know that you have had experiences. You can go back now. I know that you have had experiences. I know that your experiences are different than mine. Your experiences are going to take you through tunnels and bridges and situations and life that mine will never take me through. But mine will take me through what I need. And you'll go through your experiences of marriages or marriage or no marriages, of laws in Ghana or laws in the USA or laws in Russia or laws wherever it might be in Israel. You'll go through the experience of terrorism in nations like Israel and Iran and Iraq, and we have people there. You'll go through experiences of living out there in the country all by yourself, and the biggest thing you have to worry about is whether or not your garden's growing well or not. Whatever the experiences are that you have, you'll go through them. And I am determined to know nothing among you except what you learned about yourself in these experiences. That's what Paul is saying. I'm determined to know nothing among you except you and how you have come through your learning experience or your crucifixion. Because you had to crucify the theophany thoughts in many situations. You had to hang them on a cross and take all the written ordinances against the flesh, against your being, against who you are. And the theophany is saying, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong, you're living this way, you're married too many times, you're in adultery, you're in fornication, and you had to take all of those theophany thoughts and everything and all those ordinances and nail them to a cross and crucify them and say, yes, I did every last one of those things, but this is what I learned. And what you learned is the most important thing. Coming to your intellect. Coming to your present day. Learning. Paul says, right after he says this, I determined to know nothing among you except how you've been crucified. That's all. Just tell me what you've learned about yourself. I was with you in weakness and fear and in much trembling. Paul, a man full of, quote, the Holy Ghost, had much weakness and fear and trembling. Paul had all these things in him. What's he saying? Paul is saying, I've come to enough senses in my intellect that we all have our problems. We all have these weaknesses, whether it is a weakness of drinking, of smoking, of cursing, of blowing up your temper, whatever it might be. Paul is saying, with all of those, I come through you with your fears of how you're going to get through this, the fear of economics, the fear of my family situation, the fear of all sorts of different fears, whether or not I'm living right, I'm living good, I'm living holy, I'm living this way. And Paul said, I come through all of those weaknesses and fears in much trembling. We all were kind of, when you're trembling, you're kind of off balance. You've lost your senses a little bit, and you're troubled about which way to turn and everything else. And Paul said, I come through all those with you. And that doesn't make you a lesser person. This is what he's saying. I only want to know how you came through that crucifixion. That's all I want to know. How did you come through it? What did you learn from it? How are you now? How did you mature? How do you feel now? What are the great things that it did for you? This is all Paul is asking for from the Corinthian church. Because I don't know if you have read about the Corinthian church outside of what the Bible talks, 2 letters from Paul. If you go read about them, they were the richest church Paul had. They were the greatest economic people Paul had. They were the people who they all put their glory into gifts and into callings and into leadership and into all of these things, and they put all of their glory into that, and it was a prestigious church. And Paul went into it with all of their riches, with all of their glory, with all their prestigious accomplishments. And there were some of them that were sitting in mayor's offices, and some of them that were sitting in, when you go back and read about that church, they were owned their own businesses, and they were what we would call today multimillionaires and billionaires, and they had large groups of buildings, and they owned great lands, and just go back and read the history of it. And Paul walks into the middle of that, and he begins to talk to them. And what was he trying to do? He was trying to bring their concept down to say, all of that is good. I'm not against all of that power. I'm not against you being the king of the city or the mayor of the city or the magistrates and all. I'm not against you being all the judges and everything else. But that doesn't mean 2 cents to me. All I want to hear is, how has all of this crucifixion affected you? Because you've had to die to a lot of things to get here. And you still have a lot of things you need to die to now that you're here, because I sense that you have too much glory. You want too much prestige. Everybody's got to have a gift. Everybody's got to have a calling. Everybody's got to be rich. Everybody's got to, just like in the message, everybody's got to have their hair right. Everybody's got to have their dress right. Everybody's got to have this and that. And Paul is saying to the Corinthian church, forget that. What has these experiences brought you to in your crucifixion? For the Spirit searches all things. You know, we were down and we went and ate at a little Chinese place one evening. And so these 2 guys came in and they sat down behind us, and they had their hunting gear on and everything else. And we normally change because we don't really want people to know we're down there hunting. So we're sitting there, and this one guy, you could just tell the Corinthian spirit. He's sitting there in the restaurant, and I'm eating, and he's watching me eat. So finally I looked up at him and I said, hey, I said, how are you? He said, I'm real good. And that flapper never stopped from that moment. It just kept going and going and going. Where are you guys from? You're not from around here. What are you doing down here? Oh, you're hunting? Where are you hunting at? Where's your farm at? How much land do you have? And so he's going on and on and on. And I said, I can tell you guys are hunters, and where are you hunting at? And so away he went. Oh, my family, I used to be in the corporation, and I went all the way up in the corporation into my family. We're hunting on I don't know how much land we're hunting on. I think he called him Jimmy. He said, how much land we hunting on, Jimmy? He said, I don't know, maybe 900 acres. He said, yeah, my family's owned actually 2,500 acres on this side of the road, 900 acres on this side, and so much on that side. And we got about, I think, somewhere around 4,500 acres we're hunting on. And I said, yeah. I said, we're hunting on our little 30-acre farm down here. And you could just sense that swelled head, you know. And otherwise, a great guy to be around. But that Corinthian spirit of, I have more, I have bigger, I am worth more, I am, all of that was just coming out left and right. And so Paul was saying, I don't really care about that. All I want to know is, what did you learn from all that you have been through? And we've all have our weaknesses and our fears and our trembling. And I come through all that too. And that doesn't make you a lesser person at all. For the Spirit searches all things, even the depths of God. For who among men knows the thoughts of a man except the spirit of the man which is in him? I do not know Alan's thoughts. His spirit in him is the only one that knows his thoughts. And if we are to accomplish, or if we are to mature, or if we are to grow from his thoughts, then he needs to speak from his learning in his crucifixion, because this life is the crucifixion. This life is taking the theophany hanging and the human flesh and trying to bring the two together and make them one in flesh. And to do that, you're going to crucify many of your theophonic thoughts and just lay them away and say that's not what it was. And you're going to learn how to crucify many of your fleshly thoughts and say, I don't want to go there either. And you come to a compromise. You come to all of those things in your heart, and you pull the two together to make them one, because they are really one. And so we have this going on. Finding our intellect. The next slide. Paul goes on to say, even so, the thoughts of God no one knows except the Spirit of God. Now, I like the way Paul says this. It's his way of saying things. It's like the scientist in 1550 or whenever that was. Now, we have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit of Christ. And all of our enemies out there right now are saying, there's two. There's the spirit of the world and there's the spirit. It's Paul's way of saying we have woke up. And we're not under that old regime anymore, trying to live after Moses. Now, we have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit of Christ. Then in Corinthians 2:16, he says, for who has known the mind of the Lord, that he will instruct him? But we have the mind of Christ. Now, this is pretty simple to me. The thoughts of God no one knows except the Spirit of God. For who has known the mind of the Lord, that he will instruct him? We have the mind of the Lord. So Paul is saying that Spirit that is in me is the mind of the Lord. And what I have to do is I came here to take this mind, which thought that it had so much without any experience, and twist this mind around, bring it into its proper shape, bring it into its proper form, and make the human mind the spirit of the world that I was given at my birth, and shape it and form it and mold it into the Spirit of Christ. It's not two different ones. That's right. Just change it. That's what this is about. And we have such a hard time doing that. We want to hold on to the Word, the original theophany thought without any knowledge. Or we want to come over here and say, I can play and do anything I want. Well, there's an in-between. That we need to pull these two extremes together and get the pendulum into the center of the road. And people are having a hard time with that. So we go to the next slide. We see where that Paul has given us our line of thought. We have the mind of Christ. We just need to develop it. We need to change it. We need to make it everything that it needs to be by our experience. At the end of the seventh angel, the kingdom would reshape itself again and move from the female dominant ages to the inclusiveness of the world systems. The kingdom of Christ. We moved into the world of the red dragon, and Christ is the one in the heart turning the red dragon, humanity, in the direction and the reign that is chosen. So we have the red dragon, or the DNA, or you sitting there in your iron system, ruling the world with a rod of iron. 78% of your body is blood, the iron. This is the rod that we are ruling our world with. So we see this, and the Spirit moved into this world. Now, we need to take the rod and work with the rod until we come to the point that we are matured and working our kingdom in a proper manner and in a proper form and reshaping it and making it what it's supposed to be. So we have this whole content of finding our intellect, or we are not living in a dominant female church ages. We are not living in a dominant male Old Testament Israelic commandments. We are not living in a Third Testament, all of these other two, just trying to pull them together and using the law, using the male and the female like they're two separate things under a headship. But we moved over into love divine. We moved over to a point to where we're taking the red dragon, the bodies that we are wearing right now, with all the systems that we are living under, and we are coming to our own intellect on how to operate this and make it work. How to disseminate this throughout the planet, throughout the world, how to make it work, how to bring it to this, because there are generations after generations after generations that are coming after us, and these things are going to be very important to their development, to be able to, and I'm not saying this to be sacrilegious, but to be able to pull out of all the old intellect from Adam to William Branham and come to our own intellect of our age, our way, and our mind. So we have to eat of the tree that's given to us. What tree, what are the things that have been given to us? Number one, the red dragon, the Iron Man. I always like using those. We used Wonder Woman last week. The Iron Man, here he is, full of iron. That's the rod. And he's going to rule the world with it, or he's going to bring the world to a companionship with him. And so what are the things we've been given? The red dragon system, the DNA. And we've been given Christ, which has taken the DNA and made it one. Made the red dragon and the man-child one. The man-child is Christ, and the red dragon, he has taken that kingdom and taken it over, and the flesh and blood and the theophany have become one. And I wrote just a little bit about it in the next slide, if you want to go to it. He said, I wrote, to eat of the tree of knowledge was an entry into another kingdom. You know it was. It changed everything for them. The tree, or doorway, into the kingdom reshaped everything in their way of life and the cosmos around them. Everything changed. The kingdom was dark. I'm not talking about 12 o'clock at night. I'm talking about they didn't know. Darkness, they just didn't know. The kingdom was dark, or unknown, and it needed to be brought to light, or understanding. Humanity, kingdom, and it held amazing attributes of understanding within it. But they started out not knowing what any of those. They had to, as they came upon them, they had to face them, no different than you and I. Now we're stepping into a new kingdom. We're stepping in, it's the same kingdom. We're reshaping it. We're reshaping the thoughts of Adam, the thoughts of Enoch, the thoughts of Noah, the thoughts of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Moses and Ezekiel and Hezekiah and right on down the line, Hosea and Joel, we're reshaping all of those thoughts. Jesus and the 7 brethren of the church ages. And now here we are in this day, and we're reshaping all of those thoughts, putting a portal out there, putting a whole new doorway out there to move through. And saying, look, we ate everything there was to eat of that kingdom. The 7th angel messenger came to pull it all together and finish it. He said that. He said he was to finish the Second Testament and put it away. So we see all of that. So the kingdom we stepped into now is a whole new kingdom. It was dark. It's not dark to me anymore. It's not unknown to me anymore. I understand it. I understand humanity. I understand what we're here for. I understand the red dragon system. I understand the man-child. I understand how the two have become one in me. I understand how I am taking care of it. I understand what is going on in the world. I'm not worried about Trump or Putin or Benjamin Netanyahu or anybody else. I'm not worried about those nations. I'm not worried about them pushing a button and nuking everything. I'm not worried about the world being blown off of its axis and blown to the smithereens and everything annihilated. I'm not worried about a heaven. I'm not worried about a hell. I'm not worried about any of it. Some people would look at me and just say, well, you're just an atheist. Atheism is probably much closer to what I believe than anything. Because I don't believe in any absolutes. I don't believe that there's any one thing that I need. What I need is life. What I need is progress. What I need is maturity. What I need is all of these things combined, and I get them through every person that's ever wrote anything, or every person that's ever said anything, or every person that is ever lived, or every person that is living. I constantly look through it all and gather in the knowledge to be able to apply it, because it was my body all the way through. That mind that laid in each one of them was my mind. And I'm 64 years old now, and I'm not going to go back to a teenage mind and act like I know it all, because I don't. I'm learning and I'm progressing. And I'm not going to go back to a teenage mind and get out of my maturity and all of those things. I am a mature person now. I understand myself and I understand you. From the moment you start talking to me, I understand where you're coming from. We stepped into a new doorway, a new way of life. The kingdom was dark, but we're coming to an understanding. We've come to our intellect. Some people are having a terrible time coming to their intellect, finding who they are. Understanding. Humanity is the kingdom, and it held amazing attributes of understanding within. To understand, it's very hard to understand. When we look at a person and we see them in some kind of contrast to what we believe, and you know all the laws we believe. Maybe they're not doing this right or that right. They're not living what we think right. They're not living in the right way. They have messed up their life. They're like the woman at the well. They've had 6, and the one living with now is not theirs. They're like the woman that was drug out in adultery. They're like blind Bartimaeus. They're blind as they can be. They got this problem, that problem. They're like the one in Garnea in the graveyards and running about naked and cutting himself and everything else. And they got all these problems, and we look at them and we cannot believe that that is Christ. If you said and think those things, that everything that's going on in the earth is not Christ, not everything. There is another spirit. If you think that, you haven't come to the intellect of this age. You haven't come to the senses. Your senses are dull of hearing. And sometimes I may use the word God, because I know that's where you are at. And I'm like Paul. He used a lot of base words to the Corinthian people because he was trying to bring them back from where they're at and progress them and help them move forward. And it's the same way with us. Many times I'm using words or terms or even sitting here preaching when I think we're so far beyond preaching. But some people still need a little bit of that because they are still in their senses holding on to those sweetheart teenage years. And you got to try and get them out of it. Make them realize we're not single anymore, nor are we in a engagement, nor are we marrying. We are beyond all of those things into something way beyond that. So when we come to an intellect, that all I'm looking for is Jesus Christ or Alan Copeland crucified. Alan, you came through this and this and this. How did that affect you? Well, I'm condemned and I feel bad about this and I feel... No. We all been through our weaknesses. We all been through our fears. We all been through our trembling. I'm not asking about... I want to know the good things that you learned from what you just came through. You shouldn't feel that way. You shouldn't feel condemned. You shouldn't feel upset. You shouldn't feel you messed your life up. You shouldn't feel I went a route that I shouldn't have taken. You shouldn't feel any of that if you come to the senses and the intellect of this age, because this age says none of that matters. What matters is, what did you learn coming through there? Well, I learned that I'm going to do this way and this way and this way, and it's going to be better if I ever have to face that situation again. And here's the things in my life, the love and the peace and the joy and the things that I found. It's helped me to enjoy life better. It gave me a good contrast. It taught me the things that I really didn't want to go through. And you can have all of those things. Intellect. David, now that you have murdered a man and stole his wife and committed adultery with her before you murdered him and gave her a baby, and now that you have done all this, and you and your captain coerced together to kill this man, and he pulls the whole army back, and you had other men hiding your shame, David, how do you feel now that you've been spit on, driven from the throne, your own wife's raped by your son, and everything else? This exactly, how does that make you feel? I'm condemned, I'm this. No. Go read the book of Psalms. Go read the things that David said. David said, I've been through crucifixion. I've been through some things that I wish I had done differently, but I will tell you this. I am on top of the world. I understand who I am. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil. Open up, ye everlasting gates, the King of glory's coming through. I will put my hope and my trust into the things that I have learned. I will put my hope and trust into the Lord. I trust the people. I'll keep this sheep coat on. I'll understand who I am. I will be your king, and what I have come through has helped me to move into a greater way of life. Many of us in this age can't come to that intellect. We're too busy with our laws. Why, you filthy thing, you ungodly thing, you're still doing this, you did this, you can't, the only thing you can do is come to church and pay tithes. You can't be anything. Just constantly digging away at all of the little things that happen when Paul said we've all been through it. Weakness, fear, and trembling. Pastor Joe Gomez wrote something, and I wanted to read it. If we go to the next slide. He said, enjoying life to me is a pleasant feeling of being with people who are connected with you in a special way and sharing moments of awakening as humans. That's what this is about. It's not about setting up a bunch of laws. It's about sharing moments of awakening with humans. What you woke up to. What did your crucifixion bring you through? Long life is not so much on the length of time lived here, and I agree, but more on the quality of your time here. One can stretch precious moments to eternity. I think that's beautiful. And that is finding our intellect. Taking all of these moments and stretching them into eternity. Making them match and shape and reshape and recast us into the person we need to be. And when you do that, then he says prosperity is not really an abundance of what we own, but the richness of what comes out of you. Things you possess within that naturally flows out and shares. Enjoy life, live long, and prosper. These are my thoughts. These are what I had in my mind when I was saying these things. And that is, enjoy life as humans, and as you wake up, enjoy it together, and stop trying to kill one another, fight with one another, condemn one another, and put laws on one another. Long life, taking what we are doing and matching it into eternity. I know I am an eternal being, and I'm taking this life and I'm using it and segueing it into all of the moments of eternity. And prosperity is what's coming out of the inside of us. Whether I'm sitting on a king's throne or on a dunghill, no matter what I am, I want to be. I want things to flow out of me. When Job was sitting there in his very worst moments on an ash heap and was having all of that trouble, some of the greatest, most beautiful words were coming out of his mouth. When he was talking about all the things that, though you slay me, yet I'll trust you. And talking about all the things that he had lost, but he had lost nothing. He had gained so much more. And he just kept going on and on about these great things. That's enjoying life, living long, and prospering. Coming to your intellect, coming to your understanding. The next slide. Brother Enrique. I thought it was a very good thought about finding our intellect. We could no longer commit adultery. Now, I know some of you are sitting there saying, oh, yes, you can. Well, how can you? If the male and the female are finished, exactly what is adultery? Adultery is taking the female of another man. Or the female taking the man of another woman when she's already married. That's adultery. How can we do that in this age? We have come beyond those concepts. I just can't imagine somebody saying, I'm living in adultery. What? You certainly haven't come to the intellect of this age if you think you're living in adultery. We have passed the age of the church, the woman's age. We've passed the age of seed planting, the man's age. We've passed the age of male and female. That separation is done, completed its purpose. We have become Adam. The whole humanity is Adam, us. Let us enjoy our resurrection. We came up out of all that separation. You can commit fornication in separation. You can commit adultery in separation. You can commit murder in separation. You can commit all those things in separation. But exactly how do you commit all those things when nothing is separated? When it's all one? You can't. And we're in an age where these things no longer apply, but we want to apply them on one another. And you know why? Because we haven't come to the intellect of this age. We haven't come to the senses we need to come to at this age and apply them. We would be applying the fact that we are clean, holy, pure, godly. There's no sin. And all of that naming of everything is just names of sin. And there is no sin. Paul said, remove the sin, remove the law, and there's no sin. So we've come to this age, but we want to continually apply. I was thinking, I was down, I want to read the next slide first. I was sitting and thinking about many things while I was hunting. The Lord is not raising up, Brother Isidro, I love this. The Lord is not raising up a perfect human being, but he is raising up a perfect understanding of humanity. I thought, wow, that is the perfect, that is us right there. We're not trying to make a perfect human being. And I was sitting there and I was thinking about many things. I was thinking about when I was up and sitting there and just sat back, and I began to think about the ministry, William Branham's ministry that I was in, all the beautiful and great things that I seen. I seen the pillar of fire. I seen the dead raised. I seen the sick healed. I seen the blind eyes open. I'm not talking about somebody fooling around and getting somebody up out of a wheelchair that didn't belong there anyway. There wasn't nothing wrong with it. About the Benny Hinn's and all that. I seen really amazing things. And I seen the pillar of fire 2 or 3 times in that little young time that I had with William Branham. I was 11 years old when he passed. But I seen so much that it'll never leave my mind. And then I come in and I seen so many other great things that happen. I was thinking of our ministry and how many times I seen the pillar of fire in the ministry that the Lord, that's coming out of me. And I seen it. I remember in Africa, I had traveled all day, 24 hours. I had preached 3 times at Brother Newarkport Herbert's, and it was a wonderful time. I had traveled 4 hours getting there in a van, traveled 4 hours back, preached 2.5 hours each time. Got back that evening, I was so tired. And so the man I was with, he asked me, he said, I know it's my time to preach, but he said, I would rather you preach. I said, okay, I'll preach. So I was so tired. I laid down that evening and I said to myself, I can't do this. I am washed up. And I was laying there like a rag, and I was crying, and I just went to sleep. And that man that night, 2 times, not once, twice, he woke up and saw the pillar of fire hanging over me. And when I woke up, I asked the Lord, please somehow strengthen this body. Help me, because I want to do the right thing for the people. I didn't travel over here to skip out on them. I want to do the right things. And they've come from everywhere. They travel and everything else. That night, twice, he saw the pillar of fire hanging over me. And when he saw that pillar of fire hanging over me, he said it was so real. And he gave testimony of that many times. People heard him testify of it in church and everything else. And you know, then all these accusations come up about me. And I told you my part in it. And everything else, all the other accusations were just lies. It's all they were. And, you know, he looked at me and he said, how could you do the things that you've done after the pillar of fire and the angel of the Lord dealing with you? And I said, you should be asking yourself that question. How could I possibly do the things you're talking about? I couldn't. I wouldn't. The angel of the Lord would kill me. That's exactly that. I mean, that's where I'm at in this life. They lose their intellect. They lose their senses. Many other great things I was thinking about in our ministries. You say, David murdered, committed adultery, lusted after a woman, committed adultery, coerced with a captain, to send her husband home so he would lay with her and hide the child. That didn't work. The man said, I'm not going to do that. I'm going back to fight the battle. And he stayed outside on his porch, went back to the battle. So David said, now I got to do something else. Coerced with the captain and said, when the battle gets rough, I want you to pull the army back and I want him dead. And him and his captain murdered that man. And Peter stands up on the day of Pentecost. He's preaching and he says, the prophet David said, he'll not leave his Holy One in hell, neither let his body see corruption. And we know he wasn't speaking of himself, for His tomb is still there today, but Jesus Christ has resurrected. Here's Peter calling David a prophet. Here's Nathan telling David, you have no sin after everything he had done. Don't worry about it. You have no sin. Everything else. Now we look if we can ever come to the intellect that we're not looking for the perfect human being. If you make Don Parnell perfect, I promise you this one thing, you'll leave me. Because I am not perfect. And sooner or later, you're going to find something wrong. You're going to say, he said this. People who called me prophet, people who called me their pastor, people who said they saw the pillar of fire with me, people who came to me in numerous occasions, healed time and time and time again, now calling me false prophet, telling people that come here that Don Parnell is preaching false doctrine. Why did all of this happen? Because they set me up on a pedestal and made me their perfect God, their perfect prophet, their perfect being, their absolute. And then something happens, like happens to every human being. And when that something happens, he's ungodly, he's filthy, he's no good, he's everything. What happened to all of that? What happens is you went into an intellect of another age where they set men up like Paul, Irenaeus, Martin, Columba, Luther, Wesley, and Branham, where they set men up and they said, these are our perfection. There's not one man in the Bible, not one, that you can find from me that was perfect. Go find me one. I heard William Branham say one time, Joseph was perfect in every way. There was nothing about him that he did. And I thought to myself, oh really? He sat there and deceived his brethren for months. Told them he was a Pharaoh, next to the Pharaoh, talked to them mean, sent them on their way 2 or 3 trips, done everything to them, hiding himself from them. Then when he gets his father Jacob over there, Pharaoh doesn't like people who herd sheep. So he tells Pharaoh, Jacob is a cattle herder. Wow. Joseph lied. You can't find a man in the Bible. And the issue and the intellect of this age is the Lord is not raising up a perfect human being, but he is raising up a perfect understanding of humanity. He is moving us from theophany to flesh. And he is moving us from flesh to theophany. And we're pulling together and becoming one. That is finding our intellect. I remember one of the men, he stood up in my pulpit and he said, I thought William Branham was the last message. And I never dreamed that there was enough time for another message. But I guess there is. We have another prophet. And now today, he calls me false prophet. What happened? They didn't enter the intellect of the age. This age says, get your eyes to one place. I only want to know Daniel Brooks and him crucified. How did these things make you a greater person? I only want to know Aubrey Copeland and her crucified. I only want to know Pam. I only want to know how the Jesus, the Spirit that's in you, took all of this contrast and all of this law and all of these things and brought it to abatement and raised up to a greater and better human than you were before. That's all I want to know. And when you start telling me about your weaknesses, oh, but you don't understand. I really can't do anything because I'm married twice. I'm married 3 times, or I'm living with this lady, but we don't have a legal marriage. All kinds of things that people tell me, write me, and everything else, and I write them back, and I said, I really don't care about that. If you hadn't told me, it wouldn't even be known. Just leave those things alone. Just leave them alone and love one another and come to the right intellect. Well, I murdered this guy. Well, I've been in prison 2 or 3 times. You just don't you don't know my life. You're right. I don't know, and I don't really want to know. What I want to know is, how did it bring you to the point you're at, and how has it matured you? How has it made the Christ in you a greater action than it was before? That's all. And we love one another, and we keep moving forward, finding our intellect. Brother Louis Villamore wrote this. Do you understand where I'm coming from?
Yes.
If you go back, yeah, there you go. The time and season is now for knowing the mind of your spirit, that you are the Lord. Live free in this consciousness and prosper. If you think the Lord is not you, listen to him. If you think the Lord is not you, you are out of season. For this is the season and time of declaring your real identity. I am Christ. I am what I am. This is the time for accepting the season you are in. Understanding and knowing yourself clearly is the greatest of all realities. You are the Lord, and you will breathe it freely. I really like that. That's what it is. Stop to make yourself something lesser. Stop trying to say that my weakness is no good and I feel condemned over it, and my strengths are great and I feel good. No. Your weaknesses are just as great as your strengths. And as you use those two, it will develop you. And my weaknesses and my problems and my quirks and my little things about my personality will help me every day of my life to grow into a greater person. And it's time for us to declare that the Spirit within us is the Lord. The Spirit that was breathed into me at the birth when I was there in 1954, February 8th in St. Elizabeth Hospital, that Spirit that was breathed into me was the Lord God Almighty. And he has never left me, never forsook me, and I developed myself into the point that I know I'm him. It's the season. I couldn't do that in the last season. There was something superior to me in the last season. There were laws and limitations in the last season. And therefore I had to condemn myself in certain things, make myself inferior in certain things. And then I had superior things. I had a gift. I had a message. I had a preaching gift. I had a healing gift. And there were all of those superior things. And everybody felt inferior to that. I'm outside of that now. I've come to the understanding that my weaknesses and my strengths are the Lord. And it's me. And I've come to the same understanding for you. I'm not looking for things about you to make you inferior to me. This is not the season of that. The next slide. When we come to the mature senses of our intellect, we realize that humanity is the Christ, the anointed. We are not looking for a perfect human being, but our spiritual growth and senses have brought us to the simple fact that our understanding of humanity, the Christ, is the perfection that the Spirit is desiring. He's desiring for us to understand humanity. Our very spirit, the human spirit, is seeking to understand what? Itself. Humanity. Let's think about this for a few minutes and discuss it. Have you come to your senses, to your intellect of this age? Can you look at a person who is under the laws of every other age, under the limitations of every other age, and under the message of every other age? They have failed. Can you look at that person and say they are a victory? Can you look, whoever it is, your little lawful mind says, adultery. The next one walks in the room and you say, fornication. Next one walks in the room and you say, hair's cut. No, can't. Next one walks in the room, if they had any kind of spirit about them, they wouldn't be wearing that. You know, exactly. Go. Has it come to an intellect that says, hallelujah, good to see you, love you with all of my heart, I am glad you're here. And they say, but, oh, no buts about it, no buts at all. Glad you're here, we love you. Have you come to that point to where you feel that way and you have that understanding and you can help people and you can help yourself develop? I was thinking about Moses setting up all these laws. And the very first thing that he set up was love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, and mind. And the second thing that he set up was love thy neighbor as thyself. And then he comes on through the commandments. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not. Thou shalt not. Thou shalt not. You know, and then they took those 10 and they just inundated the world with hundreds and hundreds and thousands of more little things off of those 10. Can you drop every one of those and just go back to one? And that is, love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, and mind, and love thy neighbor as thyself. We have such a hard time going back to the simplicity. It is the human nature to exacerbate everything. And when someone comes along who says, hey, let's pull this back around to the simplicity of the gospel, of what Moses really wrote, of what Jesus really said, love thy neighbor as thyself. What you've done unto the least of these, my brethren, you've done it unto me. Jesus showing you his picks. You know that Jesus wasn't using the law. He wasn't using the concepts of Moses to pick Peter and James and John and Bartholomew and on and on and on, and Paul. And you know he wasn't using the law to pick Martin Luther, who had a smoking problem, and he had a cursing problem, and he had, we call those things problems. He had all of that. And you know he wasn't using the law when he chose someone like John Wesley to preach sanctification. When John Wesley gets up and he's preaching all about sanctification, and you need to stop this, and you need to stop that, and you need to stop your drinking, and his own wife stands up while John Wesley's preaching on a hay wagon and yells out and says to him, you're putting things onto the people that you yourself are doing. You know you're a drinker. His own wife stood up yelling at him. But the Holy Spirit chose him to be the one to take him through an age of sanctification anyway. He chose a murderer to take them through the law. He chose an adulterer to take them through their first strong kingship. He chose Saul and David. He chose all of these ones, all of them so weak in our minds and so much wrong with them. And now Peter comes over and Paul comes over and all those men come over and they're referring back to them as prophets and great men of God. But see, what we do is we still use all of that law and all of those things of those other ages, and we take all of those writings and we nail them to that person. We don't nail them to the cross. We nail those writings to that person, and we say fornicator, adulterer, liar, deceiver, on and on and on, and we nail it all to them, and we cannot seem like we cannot come back around to the intellect of this age and say prophet and leader and sister and brother, and we seem like we can't come back around and do those things and say all those other things don't matter. It doesn't mean a thing. I was sitting in the stand and I was thinking about it, and I thought, all this intellect, no matter who I think about, the first thing I try to do is find something wrong. Isn't that sad? We better check into his life a little closer. I know there's something there that he's hiding or she's hiding. What we do is we immediately go after all the ordinances. And then after a while, we say, that man is perfect. He's the one I'm going to follow. He's the one I'm going to listen to. He's the leader I've always looked for. And then it goes 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 years, 12, whatever. Something comes up. That ungodly, that this and that. It's because you never did come to the intellect of the age that says everybody has weaknesses. We've had fears. We've had trembling. And I don't want to know anything about those things except how did it help you through your trial. That's all I want to know. I don't care about anything else. That's the intellect of this age that we've come to. I only see you clean. I only see you holy. I only see you upright. I only see you victorious. I only see you as the great attribute that you are, and I only see you as the great person that you are, going through a whole lot of weaknesses and fears and trembling, and we'll go through together, not separate. Together. I will stick with you. I will love you. I will pray with you. I will walk with you. I will do everything I can with you. And you know what happens? Brother Darrell and I were talking about it when we were driving and going some places. What happens is when you do that with somebody, those that have that intellect of all that perfectness, they get jealous. Well, if he wants to run with that so-and-so, go ahead. She's this, he's that, they're this, they're that. Go ahead. Yeah, they ain't nobody. You'll find out. But what I find out is those people that have all those things about them, they'll stick with you. They'll hang right with you and say, you know what? Your little problems, we'll hang with you. You hang with us. We'll love one another. We'll get through this thing together, and we'll shape it all up, and we'll do the things that we need to do. And all those others seem like they just step outside and look through the window and get jealous over everything. Get past that intellect of perfectness. There is a perfectness. And that perfectness is the Lord is not raising up a perfect human being, but he is raising up a perfect understanding of humanity. There are men who are helping me for most of my ministry. Men like Mitta Edwardson, men like Joe Gomez, men like Joe Saldana, men, for most of my ministry, they have helped me, been together with me, done everything with me. And I could keep naming them. The brothers, different ones in the Philippines, Brother Louis Villamore, Brother, just so many different ones, Brother Jess Santos. I remember I was looking at Jess I was watching his live broadcast that he does. And I said, oh my, Jess is getting old. Don't take offense, Brother Jess. But I was just looking at it, I thought, wow. I remember that sharp little young guy sitting on the steps there outside the hall, and us talking and just laughing and having a good time. And we were so young. And I know when he watches me on, he's probably sitting thinking, wow, Don's getting old. That's okay. We stuck together. We loved one another. Men like Brother Edwin, a Roman. I remember Brother Edwin, a Roman, coming to me in the hall there in Manila, and I was still in Fairborn at that time. And he said to me, Brother Parnell, I know that the Lord has sent you. I know I can see the spirit of a prophet, and I will always pay close attention to what you say. Lord, that was 1990, whatever. All of these years. And he's seen all my quirks. He's seen my ups and downs. He's seen my issues. He's seen everything. He's seen all of the changes. I mean, he's seen them all. Coming out of the church ages, coming out of Fairborn, coming out of the Second Testament into the Third, coming out of the Third into Love Divine. And he has not followed me. He has come through every one of them because I'm able to look at him and look past all of... If you wanted to know a man full of law, you should have known Edwin, a Roman, before he came to this. This freed him and his assembly as much or more than anyone that I have seen anywhere. And he will tell you that. His testimony is that how much this has freed him. And it's not because of me, but in another sense of the word it is. It's because I was Don Parnell. It's because he was David that the mighty men stuck with him. And David had a bunch of, I'm sure David certainly didn't use the law when Samuel came to him and said, David, you're going to be the next king, and anointed him. And then Saul began to chase David. And the scripture said that David went out and hid in caves and done all these things and ran about, and it said he got all of those who were outlaws and men of Belial. You know what Belial means? Look it up. Drunkards. He got men that were drunkards and outlaws, and he made them his mighty men. 7 great mighty men. He made them. His congregation was drunkards and outlaws, running from cave to cave until he could get to the throne. And he didn't leave them when he went to the throne. He went to the throne with them and made him his mighty men, made him his generals, made them everything. And they all stuck together. And when he did what he did, he done what he done. He was out there and they spit on him, and one of the mighty men pulled his sword and said, I'll cut the head from that dog. And David said, leave him alone. This is the Lord. Just let it be. They were sticking together through thick and thin, through everything, because they had the right intellect. And that intellect is, this is what the Lord's doing today. And I'm not looking for the perfect human being. I'm looking to find the perfect understanding of the humanity that I am in today. That's what this is about. Loving one another, staying together through thick and thin. The Lord is not raising up a perfect human being, but he is raising up a perfect understanding of humanity. It's the greatest time right now. And I know that the very large majority of us have moved to this understanding. This puts us on a level playing ground. You know, when I say a level ball field, if you want to call it that. We're all in this together. And when you don't set yourself up on a level playing field, it's very hard to understand one another. When I expect different things out of Alan than I expect out of Pam, when I expect different things out of you than I myself would do, when I try to make you inferior to me, or I am your leadership, I know sometimes I am your leadership, but I want you to know sometimes you are my leadership. And leadership goes both ways. And when I hear and see things that you say, I pay close attention to it. I don't throw it aside. I hear what you're having to say. I weigh it out and I apply it the best way that I can. Sometimes I may put it on a shelf because I just don't understand it, but I don't come back and berate you and rock you and do everything else. We're still brothers and sisters. That's what this intellect is about. It's a completely different intellect, and we have found our intellect for this age. And that is, lay aside all these laws and substitutes and thoughts that we had and come to humanity. All of the laws in us, we use them on one another to try and be the same. We thought we could do that. We thought it's what we wanted, but we proved it's not. When we were theophany, we had the knowledge of these laws, but didn't know what to do and how it would affect us. Then we created a world to desire and make one wise. And we are gaining our understanding. We are in love, commitment, understanding, and our love is the greatest teacher. That's what this is about. Lay your laws down. We have proved this one thing to ourselves. You on Facebook, you out there on the live broadcast, you sitting here in this room, all across the world, we have proved one thing to ourselves, and that is humanity is Christ, and there is not a perfect person, a perfect human being in the manner of all of those 6,000 years of law. Show me one. They're not there. Now, what do? We come to an intellect that says we're not looking for that. Therefore, I'm not going to set Daniel up for failure. I'm not going to set Alan up for failure. I'm not going to set a Tory up for failure. Put him up there until he sneezes wrong. Oh, well, he ain't my God anymore. Well, I didn't want to be your God to start with. I didn't want to be any of that to start with. I never wanted that intellect. Go all the way back to my very first message that I ever preached in my life. I've never wanted an intellect. I am superior to you, ever. And now we've come to that realization that that's what the Lord is wanting. Our spirit is seeking that. Can we do it? Can we come to that I don't care what you did? Oh, that's just Alan and Aubrey. They would follow him anywhere. Is that really the intellect? I know better. They love me so much that they would never leave me, but they are following the spirit within them. And it's the same way with Pam and Daniel and Connie and so many others, Daryl and Denise. I mean, Brother Daryl and I, we've got such differences in our spirits. But you know what? I'll just be real truthful with you. There are people that aren't sitting here today because they got jealous over Brother Daryl, mine and his relationship. Because I hunted with him, because we bought a farm together, because In their lawful minds, he had a lot of issues. Issues I didn't care about. I didn't see. I seen a man who wanted to serve the Lord. I seen a man, a wife, and 2 children that loved me, loved the Lord, wanted to serve the Lord. And I worked my way through all of that to have a very close and enjoy one another. And others said, why, you become his friend. He's never been that close to me. Well, if that's what he wants, he can have him. Boom, boom, boom. I'm going to tell you, I know at least 3 families that walked away because of that. And I know that I would have not done it any differently. And I feel the same way about those families as I feel about Daryl. I love them. But for some reason, they couldn't take that line of intellect that you would love someone with all of those issues. When you know what? I was their pastor for years. And I know all of their issues too. And their issues are just as bad. Maybe they don't wear them on their sleeve like Daryl does. But their issues were just as bad. Now the problem is, are we get past this intellect and love David anyway? And let him be who he's going to be. And love Moses anyway. And love Samson anyway. Even though the Spirit of the Lord had to move in on Samson in the middle of the night and say, your enemies are upon you. Get up out of the bed of this whore and get out of this town. Because that's where he was at. He was in bed with a whore. And the Spirit said, get up, and the Spirit of the Lord moved on Samson. I won't even say a whole lot about what he just came out of. But the Spirit of the Lord moves on Samson. He grabs the gates of the city, puts them on his shoulder. You know how big the gates were. Puts them on his shoulder, walks up on the hill of Hebron, throws them down, and looks back at his enemy and says, you're not going to capture me in that place. Now, how could the Spirit of the Lord do such a thing with such a vile man? Because we've come to an intellect that the Spirit of the Lord is not looking for a perfect human being. He just wants us to understand humanity perfectly. That's what he wants. That's what this is about. Find the right intellect, and you'll get past all these things in this age. Amen. Anybody have anything they want to say? I waited. Yeah.
Susie handed her, she moved over behind the pole. Saw that.
There he goes. I'll tell you a quick story about Brother Darrell. Now, he doesn't remember this, but I do. My son Joshua, he was being recruited by by colleges. So we had a meeting up at Ball State, Indiana, Muncie, Indiana area. And my sister was going to rent me a car. I said, no, I'll just drive the old car I have. No, don't waste your money. Well, I get off of 70 onto, was that 39, 36 going up to Muncie?
Yeah, 35.
Okay. Get off of there, flat tire. Just past that Love gas station, about a quarter mile, flat tire. I thought, okay, great. 6 something in the morning, dark, and I'm out here to flat tire. I go to change it, the spare's flat. I'm thinking, man, what am I going to do? Cars. All of a sudden, somebody stops. Says, you need help? Say, yes, I have a flat tire and my spare's flat. They took me down to that Love station. I bought another tire. They came back, made sure I was okay, got it put on there, and they kept going. That was Durrell. All those years, I never knew him, but that was Durrell. I didn't realize until he came to the church. I thought, that's the man that helped me that day. Now, I didn't think, what's he doing out at 6 something in the morning? I didn't care. He had the Spirit to stop, and he saw that I was in need, and he helped me.
Yes.
That's Brother Darrell's Spirit.
And that's Brother Darrell.
Yeah. There are people in this world that he'll tell you he hate, but if one of them's broke down on the road, he'll stop and help them.
He'll give you the shirt off.
He
his
sure
back.
will.
That's right.
Yeah. That's Brother Darrell. You could, okay. This is your time. This is your day. Live every moment, leave nothing to change. Swim in the sea, drink of the deep. Embrace the mystery of all you can be. Faced with tomorrow, faced with today, faced with humanity, oh, what will you say? This is your time, this is your dance. Live every moment, leave nothing to change. Swim in the sea, drink of the deep. Embrace the mystery of all we can be. Faced with tomorrow, faced with today, faced with humanity, oh, what will you say? This is your time.
Amen.
Thank you.
This is your time. As well stand. I always like to look and see, oh my, I went way too long.
For 16 slides.
Amen. Join us for just a minute. Hands together. Lord Jesus, we thank you for what you've done for us, for giving us this understanding, the Spirit within us becoming one, letting us recognize that the crucifixion wasn't just Jesus on the cross. It is us. It is who we are. That's what this life is about, and it's bringing the theophany and the flesh together as one. And we are doing that every day, and we thank you for it. Be with us, lead us and guide us, heal our sick, take care of everyone, those that need it economic, those that need financial, those that need healing in the body, on the live broadcast, here in this room and across the world. In the name of Christ, the action of the Holy Spirit, we ask you to do these things for us. Amen. Amen. You're dismissed in the name of the Lord.